All right, what's going on, everybody? Um, I wanted to make this video because I'm hearing people make this statement a lot, and actually, there's an article out there that I just read, and it says Demetrius Andrade may vacate WBO title and move to 168 to become Canelo's mandatory. Let me just read some of these statements in this article. Because the WBO has ordered Demetrius Andrade to fight mandatory challenger Janibek Alamanov, and Eddie Hearn's not too happy about it, and neither is Demetrius Andrade. I mean, Demetrius Andrade just had a mandatory, and they can't understand why they have to fight this other mandatory. And there, a lot of people are saying, and I believe Andrade believes this, and I also suspect Hearn believes this as well, that maybe Janibek is too much risk and not enough reward, right? I can see that, but it is what it is. You got to do what the sanctioning body tells you to do. So it says Demetrius Andrade may soon be vacating his WBO 160-pound title to move up to 168 to become mandatory for Canelo's strap. If Andrade moves up to super middleweight, he can immediately become Canelo Alvarez's mandatory with the WBO, putting him in a situation where he would need to defend against him or vacate. Okay, so this is false information, okay? Because hearing a lot of people say this, a lot of pundits say this, a lot of YouTubers are saying this, and this is just false information. Posted a whole bunch of links in the description box to explain why. Now let's talk about people saying, well, Alexander Usyk, Terence Crawford moved up, and they were able to challenge immediately for a WBO title in the higher weight class, but they became super champions from the WBO. The WBO gave them super champion status. And a lot of people don't know about the super champion status that the WBO has. Okay. So they just assume that, okay, a guy has a WBO strap and moves up to the next weight class and automatically he challenges for the WBO title in that higher weight class. But that's not correct. So let me just see here. So just try to find it in the got these articles here so you can find it. So Alexander Usyk has officially been named. This is before he fought Joshua, obviously. He's been officially named the WBO mandatory challenge in heavyweight division, the sanctioned body on Sunday. And it says Andy Ruiz Jr. is the current champ. This is before the rematch with Joshua. Anthony Andy Ruiz. It says, however, the decision is not a simple one and hasn't gone down in some quarters. Okay, so it says here. It says Usyk was the undisputed WBA, WBC, IBF, and WBO cruiserweight champion, which afforded him super champion status with the WBO ahead of his move to go up to heavyweight. So he was named super champion by the WBO because he was a unified champion. Now the WBO has its own criteria for making someone a super champion. Having all four belts is one. They can make you super champion if you have 10 consecutive defenses. They could make you super champion if they believe you have an exemplary resume, right? But they have to make you the super champion first before you can challenge for that title in the higher weight class. And a lot of people don't understand that. And here's another WBO names Crawford super champion. This article is in the description box too. So Crawford moved up and fought Jeff Horn because he was a WBO super champion, because once again, he had all four belts at 140. So they made him super champion. So it's up to them to make that designation to the fighter. Now, Demetrius Andrade has held WBO titles in 2 weight classes. They could elevate him to super champion, but they have not done that yet. So just to assume that, Andrade could vacate and automatically move up and challenge for Alvarez his title at 168, that's a false statement. And a lot of websites, boxing websites, and on boxing news outlets are reporting that not only with Andrade, but with any fighter. They're saying, oh, well, all you got to do is move up to, if you have the WBO strap, you just move up to the next weight class, and automatically you get a title shot at the higher weight class, which is incorrect. That's false. So I posted all the links in the description box so you guys can understand the process. Now, Andrade could still vacate and move up to 168, and he could be ranked by the WBO at super middleweight. It's up to them what they want to do in terms of ranking him. That's true, right? A lot of times when a guy moves up from a champion moves up from a lower weight class, and a lot of times he'll get ranked in the higher weight class, even if he hasn't fought in that weight class, which I don't always agree with. But the sanctioning bodies do what the sanctioning bodies would want to do. But just to be clear, just by having a WBO title does not afford you the right to move up to a higher weight class and challenge for a title at that higher weight class if you choose to do so. You have to be elevated to super champion. And again, people want to talk about the franchise champion, how that's not a real title. But according to Suleiman, that's the highest honor a WBC champion can have. You have to be a WBC champion to be elevated to franchise status. So these super champion designations by these sanctioning bodies, they basically give the fighter special privileges that a regular champion would not have. They get some leeway with the mandatories. They're able to challenge for titles if they want. There's just special privileges when you're elevated. So if a WBC champion is elevated to franchise status, when you elevate, that means you raise above, right? When you're above something, that means you have a higher status than whatever's below you. So essentially, and Mauricio Suleiman has said this. He said George Kambosos is undisputed. He said Teofimo Lopez is undisputed. Now, again, if people wanted to argue that, because at first Suleiman did say the franchise status was just a designation, but now he's actually making it a title. So they kind of changed their tune on that, right? They did change their tune on that. So things have changed, right? Things have changed with that. So people can dispute it, because at first they gave Haney that WBC belt, and they tried to change things around and play that game, and that's fine. If you want to dispute that and you're not on board with that and you don't agree with that, you're well within your rights to question that. No one, it is what it is, right? We can't, people can do what they want. But according to Suleiman, he did say that anyone who has a franchise title is basically, and they have the other belts, basically is undisputed, right? So we can argue that till we're blue in the face. These sanctioning bodies do make the rules up as they go along, but the WBO is pretty consistent with their rules. They don't change them on the turn of a dime just to appease certain fighters, and they're pretty strict with their mandatories. When a fighter has a mandatory, regardless if it's Anthony Joshua or Demetrius Andrade or whoever it is, right? They have a mandatory. They will enforce the mandatory. They're not like the WBC. They don't have their favorites. I'm sure they do have their favorites, but they're not as they don't have that level of nepotism that the WBC and the other sanctioning bodies have. So when a mandatory is due, they are pretty strict in enforcing that mandatory. So we've seen that, you know, from the WBO. So this thought that Demetrius Andrade can just move up and automatically he's going to be able to fight Canelo Alvarez, it's not true. It's not true because he has not been elevated to WBO super champion status. Okay. So if he's going to vacate that title and they're just going to move up and just expect to fight Canelo Alvarez, it's not going to happen. And here's the thing, if you don't want to fight your mandatory, that's all well and good. But Demetrius Andrade is that type of fighter where he needs a belt because he has a title right now and he still can't get fights. So if you take that title away from him, it's going to be even harder for him to get fights. He has nothing to bring to the table for Canelo Alvarez. And I know people, Beep, stop defending Canelo, stop protecting. I'm just being honest. That there's no incentive for Canelo to fight Demetrius Andrade. None. Because Canelo's not going to go down to 160. And Demetrius Andrade is just going to go up to 168, not have any fights, and just automatically expect to fight Canelo Alvarez when there's a lot of guys at 168, namely David Benavidez, that has called him out, and he's rejected that fight, right? It's prize fighting. I understand what they're trying to do, right? But once again, he's looking to cash in a lottery ticket, right? And he doesn't want to fight, or at least when I interviewed him, he didn't seem too enthusiastic about fighting a lot of the names that I threw out there at him. He wasn't too keen on fighting David Benavidez, right? He wasn't too keen on fighting, Chris Eubank Jr. He wasn't too keen on fighting Zerto Ramirez. When I asked him, he like none of those guys at 168 did he want to fight. All right, he didn't want to fight any of those guys. He's why he's like his quote is, "Why should I have to prove myself?" All right, well, I mean, then you don't have to prove yourself. I mean, do what you want to do. But again, Canelo Alvarez, you can't turn it around and say, well, Canelo Alvarez is ducking me when there's a lot of other fights that you could fight and put yourself in a situation where Canelo Alvarez would have to fight you eventually, right? I don't think the WBO, I don't think any of these sanctioning bodies are just going to make you number one or make you a mandatory unless you fight some fights at 168 and prove yourself at 168, right? There's a lot of fights at 160 that you haven't fought, And there was a time when you were at 154 and the Charlo fight was on the table and you believed that there wasn't enough money involved, so you didn't want to fight Charlo, Jamel, right? This whole situation with Jamal Charlo, I don't know who's to blame there, but you having issues making fights with Jamal Charlo, you having issues making fights with Golovkin. That Billy Joe Saunders fight was never rescheduled once the issue was there with Saunders testing positive for the stimulant. So there's a lot of fights that have not been fought at 154 and at 160 from Demetrius Andrade. Same thing with Charlo. Charlo hasn't fought a lot of guys either. Charlo never fought. Billy Joe Saunders, he never fought. Demetrius Andrade, he never fought Canelo Alvarez when he was down there. So, there's a lot of guys that these guys just aren't fighting each other and they want the golden ticket, right? They want the golden ticket. So now that he's got a tough fight coming up, and because he doesn't want to fight the tough fight, and he's going to vacate the title. See, like, you can't be a hypocrite here. So if he decides that he's going to vacate this title, right? And you guys don't criticize him for vacating this title, but you're going to criticize Canelo Alvarez for not fighting the fights that you feel he should fight when he should fight them. Then it's just hypocrisy. That's what it all boils down to. So this whole thing about him just moving up. It's he could vacate the title and ultimately put himself in a worse situation than if he was just to hold on to it. If he wants to protect his zero, that's fine. But nobody cares that Demetrius Andrade's undefeated. That's not like Canelo Alvarez isn't sitting there saying that, oh, I want to fight Demetrius Andrade because he's undefeated. He doesn't think he's a good fighter. I don't know if he really believes that or if he's just talking shit. But he's not a huge fan of Andrade. Do I think Janibek can beat Andrade right now? I think it'd be a tough fight for him. If it was an easy fight, I think he would take it. You know? The two world titles that Demetrius Andrade had, he won them. They were vacant titles. He won vacant titles. He's never beat a champion for his titles. Never. The world titles that he's held, both at 154 and 160. I guess he had a WBA regular interim, but I mean, do we really want to count that as a major title? You know? So I like Donaire against Caballo tonight. I like Donaire in that fight. Definitely like Donaire. But yeah, so that's a situation, man. That's a situation. Andrade is not going to be Canelo's mandatory just by moving up. It's the way it is. So either they try to make these fights. I mean, if Andrade beat Charlo, right? Or if Andrade beat Golovkin, and then he decided to move up, maybe Canelo would fight him. You know? I know Canelo said he would fight Charlo, but he doesn't want to fight Andrade. But they both have, Charlo and Andrade, I think, have similar resumes. But at least Charlo has had some pretty decent wins at 154. Charlo hasn't. I mean, the Charlo win against Derevyanchenko was a solid win. You can argue that Derevyanchenko could beat anyone at 160 on that's on. You could take Andrade's resume at 160, and I would say that Derevyanchenko could beat those guys. Could beat anyone on Andrade's 160-pound resume, if I'm being honest. All right, guys, that's about all I got. Just wanted to shoot that out there. Yeah, Andrade never fought Korobov. He's supposed to fight Korobov, never fought Korobov for whatever reason, right? They offered him a middleweight title shot against Korobov when Korobov, I think, was champion for that brief time, and he turned it down. So it is what it is. It is what it is. All right, till next time, Beaver's out. Talk to y'all soon. Enjoy your weekend, and stay safe. And make sure you check out the Ringside Reporter podcast every Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern time. We will be back tomorrow night, myself and Eric Lauder. Peace out. Algeri Ben, who do I think won that one? I got to have to favor Ben in that one. All right. Charlo versus Carver. I thought Korobov won, and I picked him. Yeah, I thought, Korobov could have beaten. You could argue that Korobov beat Charlo. It's funny, Andre didn't want to fight Korobov. So you can argue maybe Charlo's got a better resume than Andre, but it is what it is. All right, see you guys later. Take care, man.